The World Mother as Symbol and Fact. By Charles Webster Leadbeater. Chapter 1. The World Mother as Symbol and as Fact. It will be better that I begin with a definite statement regarding what I personally know about the World Mother, dealing with the facts as they are, and in the way they concern us and influence the work we have to do, leaving aside for the moment all the myths that have gathered around her. The World Mother, then, is a great being who is at the head of a great department of the organization and government of the world. In truth, she is a mighty angel, having under her orders a vast phalanx of subordinate angels, whom she keeps perpetually employed in the work that pertains particularly to her. This work has so many and such wonderful ramifications that it is not easy to give even the most general idea of it in a few sentences. For now, it will suffice to say that in a very real sense she has under her charge all the women of the world, and especially at the time of their greatest trial, when they exercise the supreme function that God has entrusted to them in becoming mothers. Many stories are told, especially among the peasantry, of women who have seen the World Mother at their side in those crucial hours, and many who did not have the privilege of seeing her nevertheless felt the help and the strength which she pours forth. Why should the peasantry see her, and not the more intellectual people? Exactly because those who have developed intellectually have often immersed themselves in that part of their consciousness which shuts out much of the impressionability preserved by others who live closer to nature. Nevertheless, sometimes the more developed also see her. A lady of the English nobility told me that under similar circumstances she too saw a great angel at her bedside, who wonderfully induced in her a kind of unconsciousness, in order to ease the pain at certain moments. Perhaps this is her greatest and most impressive function. But she also has another which brings her into the closest relation with humanity, for she has made it part of her work to try to mitigate the suffering of the world, to act as consoler, comforter, helper of all who are in trouble, sorrow, need, sickness, or any other adversity. For those who are strangers to this line of thought, I would recommend the perusal of a touching story entitled Consolatrix Afflictorum, in the book The Light Invisible by Monsignor R. H. Benson, and also the booklet The Call of the Mother by Lady Emily Lutyens. All students of theosophy are aware of the existence of the mighty and glorious hierarchy which constitutes the inner and spiritual government of the world. Whoever wishes to understand something about this organization would do well to consult a very clear and useful diagram which appears as Figure 118 in First Principles of Theosophy, by C. Generigidesa. From this diagram we see that while the spiritual king, the Lord of the world, is supreme above all, and the Lord Buddha is his immediate subordinate as spiritual leader of the second ray, the other 5 rays are all gathered under the direction of a high official called the Mahakahin. We see then that the Lord Vivasvata Manu, the Lord Bodhisattva Maitreya, and our Lord the Mahakahin act at a certain well-defined level as representatives of the 3 aspects of the solar logos, as far as concerns the work on the lower planes. We know of no other great being who is at that level except some who, having held high office in the past, now work elsewhere. The steps of the hierarchy being thus made clear, and the arrangement of the different rays and their leaders or chohans tabulated, it will at once be seen that the work of the World Mother could not be included in this list, for this work belongs to no special ray, but acts in a protective manner for the women native to all rays. Furthermore, the list given here indicates to us only the lines of activity of what we may call the human part of the hierarchy. But let us remember that the Lord Maitreya is the master of angels as well as of men, and in exactly the same way the great Lord of the world is the spiritual king not only of human evolution, but also of the angelic kingdom of this planet. We know that there is an angelic section of the hierarchy, but as yet we have no information which enables us to compile a similar table for it. We know that just as the adepts have divided the world into parishes, so that all nations have some kind of adept guidance, equally each nation has a presiding deva or angel. We know, furthermore, that the angels have a truly great part in the direction of evolution, that they also preside over certain districts, and that there is an elaborate distribution of lesser and greater devas, down to the local spirit who acts as guardian to a wood, a valley, a lake. But our knowledge along these lines is limited and fragmentary, and the political geography of the world from the point of view of the angelic host has yet to be written. Therefore, it is probably rash to attempt a comparison between the highly evolved persons of both evolutions, but I imagine we shall not be far wrong if we consider the World Mother, Our Lady of Light, as equal in dignity to the Chohans who are leaders of rays. I fear that in most English-speaking countries the main difficulty we shall meet in the way of trying to explain the office and work of the World Mother will be the extraordinarily bitter and irrational prejudice of the average Protestant against the Catholic doctrine of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Inevitably we shall be accused of trying to introduce Mariolatry, of trying secretly to influence our readers in the direction of the teaching of the Roman Church, for there is a vast amount of misconception connected with this subject. The Roman and Greek churches surround the name of the Holy Virgin with deep reverence, although many of their members know little of the real meaning of the beautiful and poetic symbolism attached to this name. The Church of England has somewhat limited the reverence due to her, while other Christians who do not belong to this communion usually consider that it is idolatry to worship a woman, a mental attitude which is the mere result of obtuseness and ignorance. If in these matters we really wish to understand the truth, we must begin by freeing our minds from all prejudice, and the first point to realize is that no one has ever worshipped a woman in the sense in which the outraged Protestant uses the word. He is incapable of comprehending, he does not want to comprehend, the Catholic attitude towards Our Lady or the saints. We who are students of theosophy, however, must adopt a better position than this, and try to discover what actually constitutes the Catholic position before condemning it. Let us quote the Catholic Encyclopedia, which may be taken as an approved and authoritative statement of the Roman Church on the subject. There are several degrees of worship. If it is addressed directly to God, it is superior, absolute, supreme worship or worship of adoration, or, according to the consecrated theological term, a worship of latria. This sovereign worship is due to God alone. Addressed to a creature, it would become idolatry. When worship is addressed to God, but only indirectly, that is, when its object is the veneration of martyrs, angels, or saints, it is a secondary worship, dependent on the first and relative, for it honors the creature of God because of his special relations with him. Theologians term this a worship of dulia, a term which denotes servitude, and implies, when used to signify our worship of illustrious servants of God, that their service to him is what constitutes their merit for our veneration. As the Holy Virgin has a separate and absolutely principal position among the saints, the worship dedicated to her is called hyperdulia. This seems to me to make the whole matter admirably clear, and to present a correct and defensible attitude. Much confusion has already arisen from the translation of these Greek words, with their delicate nuances of meaning, by the single term worship. I think this error, combined with the complete ignorance of most people regarding the subtleties of theological distinctions, and their fatal readiness to think ill of those who disagree with them, has been responsible for many misunderstandings and their consequent hatred. I suggest that among ourselves and in our literature we make the distinction clearly, translating latria only as worship. Dulia might be translated as reverence or veneration, and hyperdulia as deep reverence. But the point we must bear in mind is that no educated person has ever, in any place or time, confused the reverence due and properly offered to all great and holy beings with that higher worship which can be offered only to God. Let there be no mistake about this. Much nonsense has already been spoken about idolatry, chiefly on the part of people who are too anxious to force their own belief upon others to have either the time or the inclination to try to understand the point of view of wiser and more tolerant thinkers. If they knew enough etymology to realize that the word idol means an image or representation, perhaps they might ask themselves of what this thing is an image, and whether that reality might not be behind what so many misunderstood savages worship, rather than the wood or stone of which the missionaries speak so much. The image, the painting, the cross, the lingam of the Shaivites, the sacred book of the Sikhs, all these things are symbols, and not the objects of worship in themselves, but are venerated by those who understand exactly why they are designed to remind us of some aspect of God, to turn our attention to Him. In India, these aspects are called by countless different names, and missionaries hasten to condemn the Hindus as polytheists, but the servant working in their garden could tell them that there is but one God, and that all those are only aspects of Him, lines of approach to Him, divided and materialized in order to bring infinity a little more within the comprehension of our extremely finite minds. There is much need for charity, for understanding, and for a sympathetic attitude towards others who are treading another road to the feet of the God in whom we all equally believe, the loving Father of whom Christ speaks to us, the one true God who said through another of His manifestations, "All true worship comes to me, however different its name may be, and by whatever path men approach me, on that same path do I meet them. For all the paths that men tread are mine. There is nothing but God, and for whomever one feels reverence, adoration, or love, it is to the God manifest through Him that this reverence, adoration, or love is offered. Other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." Having thus tried to rise above the miasma of ignorance and intolerance into the pure air of justice and understanding, let us in this spirit approach the consideration of the beautiful and wonderful manifestation of divine power and love that lies behind the name of the Mother of the world. I do not think that anyone with our Western education finds it easy to understand the plethora of symbolism that is used in Eastern religions, and people forget that Christianity is an Eastern religion, just as Buddhism, Hinduism, and Zoroastrianism are. Christ took a Jewish body, an Eastern body, and those to whom He spoke had Eastern methods of thought and not ours. In all those religions they have a very elaborate and wonderful method of symbolism, and they take great delight in their symbols. They move and combine them, and treat them with love in poetry and in art. But our tendency is more towards what we call practicality, and we are prone to materialize all these ideals and, consequently, we degrade them greatly. Let us never forget that our religion came from the East, and that if we wish to understand it we must first look at it as an Oriental would look, suspending our modern scientific theories until we are able to see if they are adequate. They can be made adequate, but unless we know how, we are more liable to confuse everything, and we run the serious risk of assuming that the people who elaborated the allegory knew nothing and were hopelessly wrong. They were not wrong. Those beautiful ancient myths convey the meaning without necessarily presenting the crude scientific facts before those who have not yet developed their minds to understand them in that way. This was well understood in the early church. There is always much more behind those original and poetic thoughts of the men of old than most people believe. It is foolish to remain full of ignorant prejudice. It is much better to try to understand. Whatever has been artistic or helpful in any religion has always had a truth behind it. It falls to us to disentangle this truth. It falls to us to strip away the crusts of the centuries and let the truth shine forth. This holds true for the beautiful Christian symbol of the Blessed Virgin Mary. There are three different ideas involved in the usual thought regarding her: the history of the mother of the disciple Jesus, what she was and what she became afterwards, the sea of virgin matter, the great deep, the water over the face of which the Spirit of God moved, to the feminine aspect of the deity. In the course of centuries, these ideas became confused, degraded, and materialized into the form in which the story presents itself today, and have become unbelievable to any thinking person. But it would not be so if we analyzed and understood their real meaning, if we separated the myth and the symbol from the chronicle of the living person. The Roman Church teaches its faithful about the virgin birth of Jesus and about the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin herself in her mother, Saint Anne. The first of these events is contrary to the laws of nature and, therefore, it is impossible that it happened. The second, I imagine, is usually taken to mean that Our Lady was conceived, just like her divine Son, by the overshadowing of the Holy Spirit. But consulting authorized Roman publications, I have seen that this is not so, for the teaching is that she was conceived in the usual manner, like the rest of humanity, her parents being Saint Joachim and Saint Anne. It is explained that the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception means only that the mythical primal guilt of what they call original sin was not imposed by God upon the embryo of Our Lady. I wish to be absolutely fair in my exposition of this remarkable doctrine, but I must admit that it seems to me an unnecessary and even fanciful theological invention. I have never found the slightest historical evidence regarding the grotesque story of Adam and Eve and the apple, and I believe that the whole theory of original sin is simply a clumsy means of stating the fact that man brings with him, from his previous births, a certain amount of karma. If we try to interpret along this line, perhaps this doctrine of the Immaculate Conception may be taken as confirmation of the statement that Our Lady had already exhausted all her negative karma, and consequently entered her life in Palestine practically without any karma at all. But I have no data upon this. It is a mistake to present these ideas as factual occurrences in the life of a Jewish woman. It could not have been so, and therefore it is not true. But if we understand them as symbols of a certain stage in the process of creation, of the evolution of a solar system, they find their place naturally, and are seen as beautiful and significant. Stripped of them, the life story becomes coherent and credible. The same Church holds the Feast of the Assumption as commemorative of the raising of her physical body to heaven, once again a patent impossibility. But when we perceive that this is only a poetic description of the entry of a triumphant adept into the angelic kingdom, we see at once the appropriateness of all that has been written concerning it, and of the wonderful paintings it has inspired. First of all, then, let us consider the physical life of Our Lady of Light, and the consequences that followed it and led her to accept the office in which she acts today. Chapter 2. The Mother of Jesus. It must be understood that the disciple Jesus was born exactly as other humans are born. This strange doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, an attempt to explain the story of the fertilization of the Holy Virgin by the Holy Spirit, all this group of ideas refers to a myth, to a symbol. It has a real meaning and a beautiful interpretation which I will soon attempt to demonstrate, but it has nothing to do with the physical body of the disciple Jesus. The mother of that physical body was a Jewish lady of noble birth, but, according to tradition, of meager resources. We need not think of Joseph as a carpenter, for that is part of the symbolism and not of the history. In this symbolism, Joseph represents the guardian of the Holy Virgin. who is the soul of man. He represents the mind, and because the mind is not the creator of the soul, but only its furnisher and decorator, Joseph is not a mason, like the great architect of the universe, but a carpenter. We need not imagine our Lord working in a carpentry shop. This is merely an example of the confusion and materialization introduced by those who do not understand the symbol. The mother of Jesus, then, was a noble lady of Judea, a descendant of the royal house of David. Truly she, who was chosen for so high an honor, must have been pure and true and of impeccable character. A great saint, for no one else could have given birth to a body so pure, so wonderful and so glorious. She led a holy and divine life of terrible suffering, but with its equally stupendous consolations. We know little about its details, only occasionally do we glimpse one in the abbreviated narrative of her contemporaries. But it was a life that we would do well to imagine for ourselves, an example for which we may very well thank God. This life led her to great heights, high enough to make possible a curious and most beautiful ulterior development, which I must now explain. Students of the inner life know that when a person reaches the end of the purely human part of his evolution, when the next step will raise him to the superhuman condition of adept, into a kingdom as definitely above humanity as man is above the animal kingdom, when he has attained the purpose for which he was made human, diverse lines of growth open before him, and he may choose which he will follow. Occasionally, too, there are conditions in which this choice may be anticipated to a certain extent. It is not the place to discuss the options. Suffice it to say here that one of the possibilities is to become a great angel or messenger of God, to join the Devic evolution, as it is called in India. And this was the line chosen by Saint Mary, when she reached the level where human incarnation was no longer necessary to her. A vast number of angels were never human because their evolution follows another line, but there are angels who were men, and who at a certain stage of their development chose to follow the angelic line, and this is a very glorious, magnificent, and helpful line. Thus she, who 2,000 years ago carried the body of Jesus so that later it might be assumed by Christ, is now a mighty angel. Much of beautiful enthusiasm and devotion has been poured out at her feet throughout the centuries. Thousands upon thousands of monks and nuns, thousands upon thousands of suffering men and women, have drawn near to her and expressed their grief, and prayed that she in her turn might present their supplications to her Son. This latter type of prayer is a misconception, because he who is the eternal Son of God and at the same time the Christ within us needs no one to intercede for us with him. He knows, before we even speak, what is best for us. We are in him and were made through him, and without him nothing was created that was created, not even the smallest particle of dust in the whole universe. He is closer than breathing, closer than hands and feet. He who understands does not pray for the intercession of great angels, because he knows that he, in whom all angels live and move and have their being, is already doing the best that can be done for each of us. But just as one may ask for help from an incarnate friend, as one may, for example, ask for the encouragement of his thought, in the same way one may ask for help from the same human friend when he has left his vesture of flesh, and in the same way one may ask for the same kind of help from these great spirits at their higher level. There is nothing irrational or unscientific in this. I myself have received letters from people who know that I have studied these matters, stating that at such and such a time they would be under some difficulty, perhaps a surgical operation or some other trial, and asking that I think of them at that moment and send helpful thoughts. Naturally, I always did so, and as I know that there is no effect without a cause, and in exactly the same way there can be no cause that does not produce its effect, I know that if I take the trouble to fix my thought upon someone with problems or in difficulties, and try to send him helpful ideas, try to place before him something that strengthens him in his troubles, we can be perfectly certain that the thought force will produce its effect, that it will travel and act upon that person. The extent to which it can do so depends on the person's receptivity, the strength of the thought, and various other circumstances. But that it will produce some effect we can be absolutely certain. And so, when we send a request for kind, helpful, and strengthening thought to one of these great beings, be he an incarnate saint or already disembodied, or one of the great angels, surely that help will reach us and will strengthen us. This is the case with the Mother of the world, but there are those who would have us believe that all those splendid good feelings, all that love and complete devotion, were wasted and it was all useless. Incredible as this may seem to anyone accustomed to thinking along broader and saner lines, I really imagine that in their strange ignorance they are the worst of the Church's enemies today. They go even further, and say that it is wrong, evil, and blasphemous for a man to feel such love and devotion for her. Sounds like madness, but I fear it is true that such people exist. Of course, the truth is that no devotion, no love, no good feeling has ever been wrong, for whomever sent it. Devotion and affection have often been lavished upon unworthy objects, but that was not a mistake on the part of the giver, only a lack of discernment. It is always good for him to pour himself out in love, for thereby he develops his soul. Let us remember that if we love any person, it is the God within him whom we love. God in us recognizes God in him. The depths call to one another, and the recognition of divinity is synonymous with happiness. The lover often sees in the beloved qualities that no one else can see. But these qualities are in him in a latent state, because the Spirit of God is in us all, and the deep trust and strong affection of the lover tends to call into manifestation those latent qualities in the beloved. He who idealizes another tends to cause that other person to become as he imagines him to be. Could we then suppose that all the wonderful and beautiful devotion addressed to the Mother of the world was wasted? Anyone who thinks so must understand very little of the divine economy. No true and holy feeling has ever been wasted since the world began, nor will be until it ends. For God, who knows us all, has arranged that the slightest touch of devotion, the slightest feeling of understanding, the faintest thought of worship, be always received and act always to the fullest of their possibilities, and always bring a response from him. In this case, he, in his benevolence, appointed the Mother of Jesus as the great angel who was to receive these prayers, to be a channel for them, to accept this devotion, and forward it to him. Therefore, the reverence we offer to her, and the love poured out at her feet, have never for a moment been wasted. They have brought their result, they have done their work. Century after century, the richest treasures of art have drawn their inspiration from the beauty of her divine motherhood. Her glories have been set to the most magnificent music. Her wisdom has inspired the greatest doctors and teachers of the Church, for she is the heart of wisdom, the mother of righteous love, of patience and perseverance, and of holy hope, she who keeps all the words of Jesus in her heart. If we try to understand, we shall see how much greater reality is than the narrow conception that every high thought, every act of worship, every praise not directed to some particular name must inevitably be lost. Why would God limit himself because of our mistakes regarding his names? He looks into the heart and not at the words. Words are conditioned by external circumstances, by the place of birth, for example. We are Christians because we happen to be born in England or in America or in some other Christian country. and not because we examined and compared all religions and deliberately chose Christianity. We are Christians because this was the faith in the midst of which we found ourselves, and so we accepted it. Has it ever occurred to you that if we had been born in India we would be Hindus or Muslims just as naturally, and would pour out our devotion to God under the name of Shiva, Krishna, or Allah instead of the name of Christ? If we had been born in Ceylon or Burma we would be ardent Buddhists. What do these considerations of place matter to God? It is under His law of perfect justice, under His scheme of evolution, that one of His creatures is born in England and another in India or Ceylon, according to their needs and deserts. When any man pours out his devotion, God receives it through the channel He has appointed for that man, and so all are satisfied and justice is done. It would be a gross and flagrant injustice if honest devotion were lost or rejected. Never has the slightest fraction of it been rejected. God's ways are different from ours, and His understanding of these things is much greater and vaster than ours. As Faber wrote, "For we make His love too narrow by false limits of our own, and we magnify His strictness with a zeal He will not own." The stories we hear about the Mother of the world may well have their foundation in truth. We hear of her appearing in various places to various people, to Joan of Arc, for example. It is extremely probable that she or he has done so, that this great angel has indeed shown himself. There is no a priori impossibility in this, and it is highly unlikely that all the people who witnessed these apparitions were deluded or hypnotized, or had fallen into some strange error. All students know that intense thought upon any subject produces strong thought forms which remain very near the border of visibility. Thousands of such thought forms of the Lady of Light have already been created, and we may be sure that she has never failed to respond to and animate them fully and effectively. It is certain, moreover, that under favorable circumstances some become physically visible, and even when they remain astral, sensitive people can often see them. The terrible and unprecedented strain and anxiety caused by the World War made many people sensitive to psychic impressions they had never perceived before. Thus it happens that we hear so many stories of apparitions just now, and visions or manifestations of the Mother of the World occupy a prominent place among them. It is further said that through faith in her, wonderful cures have been produced at Lourdes and other places. Probably this is a fact. There is nothing unscientific in this. To suppose so is not outside of reason and common sense. We know perfectly well that a strong outpouring of mesmeric force produces certain cures. We have no knowledge regarding the limits of this power, but it is well to remember that all these things have a truth behind them. Thus, then, it was she, the Lady of Light, who sent through our president of the Theosophical Society that wonderful appeal to the women of the world. In The Brotherhood of Angels and of Men, Geoffrey Hodson writes of her, "She works ever for the cause of human motherhood, and even now is employing all her immense power and calling upon all her angelic court to work for the uplifting of motherhood throughout the world. Through her messenger angels she herself is present at every human birth, unseen and ignored, but in truth, it would suffice for people to open their eyes and she would reveal herself. She sends her message to men through the Brotherhood. In the name of Him whom I bore long ago, I come to your aid. I have taken every woman into my heart, to hold part with her there, that thereby I may aid her in her time of need. Uplift the women of your race until you see them as queens, and to such queens let every man be a king, that each may honor the other, perceiving the royalty in one another. Let every house, however small, become a court, every son a knight, every child a page. Let all treat one another with chivalry, honoring in one another the royal lineage, their august birth, for there is royal blood in every man. We are all children of the King. Now it remains for us to consider how we may avail ourselves of this privilege of serving her which she offers us, and also to deal with the symbolic aspects of the Mother of the World. Chapter 3. The Work of Today. We have now to pass to modern history and consider the work of the Mother of the World today, and the opportunity which she has recently offered us to take a part in it. It is about 3 years since she spoke to some of us regarding this matter. Indeed, I believe the honor fell to me to introduce the subject to a small group of our brothers, as the result of an audience in which the Mother of the World was gracious enough to remember me. In her function as guardian of woman, she naturally works in close collaboration with the agents of the Leadbeater, the lords of karma, whose work it is to find suitable bodies for the vast army of egos waiting to incarnate. This often represents great difficulty, requiring the most delicate adjustments in the reconciliation of conflicting needs, for obviously karma has no favorites. If it be the karma of the incarnating ego to have such and such parents, who will give him opportunities he has deserved, equally it is the karma of those parents to have such and such children, who obviously may affect their lives very seriously, and bring them much joy or much sorrow. At this specific point in history, the Manu of the 5th root race is working to develop a new subrace, the 6th, which is to possess some new characteristics, considerably in advance of those commonly exhibited by the general run of people today. How is he working to bring this new subrace into existence? Let us remember that there is no miracle about this. The new subrace is not created in the twinkling of an eye. It must grow by slow degrees from that which already exists. Let us suppose that, if the Lord Manu wished, he could select a group of people and tell them, "You shall be the new subrace," and he could make some changes in their bodies and brains to make this possible. But nature does not act like this, and when we say that nature does not act like this, we mean, it is not thus that the will of the Logos acts. All change is gradual, and we can see why. We are living entities, all of us, and therefore we can be changed in depth only very slowly. We can take what we call inanimate matter, of course it is not in fact inanimate. We can take metal and fuse it and model it into any shape with reasonable speed. But if you are a gardener and wish to mold a certain plant or tree into a determined form, you cannot take it and change its form immediately, as you would with a metal. If you did so, you would probably kill the plant. You have to gradually persuade the plant to grow in this or that direction. The same applies to all living organisms. I know that all organisms are alive, but some are more alive than others. The same surely holds true for us. We have within us the possibility of developing all the characteristics that are necessary for this new subrace. I have no doubt that we have, at least I hope so. Thus it is the same with our children. They have within themselves the necessary potentiality, and the development must be gradual, if we wish to preserve the integrity and health of the living being. Thus the method of the Manu and his assistants is one of gradual development. Sometimes we speak of promising children or of a young people. What do we mean by this? At least in this particular time, what we mean is that there are children who are already showing some of the characteristics of this new subrace. Not all. It would be extremely rare to find a child with all the characteristics of the new subrace. If it were so, she would soon reach adeptship perhaps, or at least arhatship. But such manifestations are still extremely rare. We might, however, find children born among us who show some 25% of the characteristics of the new subrace. And even in this case, this would be a great fortune, for even this is uncommon, and it would be very worthwhile, or rather, it would be the most imperious duty, to give them every opportunity for their growth in the right direction. So it happens that Our Lady, the Mother of the world, is exactly now very concerned with this matter of providing adequate bodies for well-developed egos, and this is by no means a simple task. Thousands of advanced egos are ready and anxious for an incarnation so that they may help in the work of the world teacher. But the difficulty of finding suitable bodies is immense. For example, we have the case of those who died in the World War, who laid down their lives on the battlefield in defense of truth and justice. The war was indeed a horrendous thing. On the part of the aggressors, it was perhaps the greatest crime in human history. But since it had to happen, those who direct human evolution utilized it as a means of selecting their material, separating the wheat from the chaff. All the noblest men of their generation took part in it in one way or another. This was a tremendous test applied to them. They responded to the emergency, passed the test, seized the opportunity. Therefore, they deserved a wonderfully good karma, and achieved for themselves an amount of progress that under more common conditions would not have been obtained in a dozen incarnations. They won for themselves the right to be born already in the sixth subrace. They were of all types and all classes, some refined and artistic, some rough and rude. But all had this great quality in common, that of being ready to risk their lives for an ideal. The change to the new subrace will not immediately make them refined. It cannot alter their main characteristics. They are heroes, but they have not necessarily become saints, nor refined and cultured men or women. But the sixth subrace will not be composed only of adepts, as people seem to suppose. We cannot all be priests, doctors, artists. We shall need carpenters, blacksmiths, farmers too, just as today. That new race will contain men of all classes, just as our current subrace from which the other evolves. We shall be at various levels of evolution, just as nowadays. But I hope and believe that we shall all have certain great qualities in common which only a few presented in the fifth subrace. We shall be more liberal, less prejudiced, freer in thought and action, more fraternal and compassionate. The Reverend T. W. Chignall expressed this well. Behold what triumphs arise before us as the years pass in sequence. Knowledge banishes error, the warmth of love, indifference, understanding the sun and all the earth. Man grows into a nobler pattern. He has a broader mind and heart, reverent, bold, kind, strong. Thus there will be a place for everyone at last. But here and there worthier bodies are needed for this great host, and as far as possible among young and progressive peoples. Where will they be found in great numbers? The soldiers are gradually and slowly accommodated. But the officers represent a serious problem. In consequence of foolishness and useless ostentation, a baneful tradition is growing in the Western world that men and women should no longer marry and that large families are too expensive to be practically sustainable. Not understanding the wonderful opportunities that their sex confers upon them, women wish to rid themselves of the restrictions of matrimony in order to imitate masculine lives and attitudes, instead of taking advantage of their peculiar privileges. Such a line of thought and action is obviously disastrous for the future of the race, for it means that many parents of the upper classes do not take part in its perpetuation, but leave it entirely in the hands of the less desirable and less developed egos. From the occult point of view, the greatest glory of a woman is not to become a leader in society, nor to have an academic title and live in wretched isolation in an apartment, but rather to provide vehicles for the egos that are to incarnate, and to manage a home where her children can be trained with adequacy and happiness to live their lives and do their specific work in the world. And this function of hers is considered not as a thing to hide and despise, something of which one should be ashamed. It is rather the greatest glory of the female incarnation, the great opportunity that they have and men do not. Men have other opportunities, but this truly wonderful privilege of motherhood is not theirs. It is the woman who does this great work for the aid of the world, for the continuity of the race, and she does it at the cost of suffering of which no man has the slightest idea. And exactly because this is so, because of the great work done and the terrible suffering that it entails, is there this special department of the world government. And the duty of its officers is to look for every woman in her time of suffering and give her as much help and strength as her karma allows. The Mother of the world has under her command a vast army of angelic beings, and at the birth of every child one of them is always present as her representative. Thus we can perfectly well say that in that and through that representative of hers, the Mother of the world in person is present beside every suffering mother. Her ministrations extend to all. She makes no distinction between rich and poor, between saints and sinners, between married and unmarried. She is the very incarnation of divine pity and compassion, and for her it suffices that an infant body is coming into the world, that a mother is in need of the service which it constitutes her joy to render. What the Mother of the world desires is to achieve the spiritualization of the whole idea of motherhood and marriage, and those among us who wish to serve her must try to use whatever influence they may possess in this direction. Some of us may deliver lectures. Others may write articles. She is by no means satisfied with the general position of public opinion in Europe regarding this subject. She says that motherhood is not truly understood by the majority of people in Western countries. It is not regarded, as it should be, as a high and wonderful privilege, but rather as something almost degrading. She fully sympathizes with those women who rebel justly and truly against the idea of becoming slaves to men's passions, but she says that notwithstanding this, the general view upon this matter is not what it should be. She says that people marry for all kinds of wrong and material reasons, sometimes merely for lust and desire, sometimes for convenience, such as to join two estates that happen to adjoin, sometimes to obtain position and title, and sometimes merely for money. She maintains that the only real reason for marriage is when there exists a true and spiritual love of great intensity between the two parties, for it is only under such conditions that suitable vehicles can be provided for highly developed egos. Hindu ideas on these points are usually far better, but even there they are not fully put into practice. For the time being, she considers it of vital importance to try to convert the Western world to the more spiritual point of view, since it is chiefly from parents of the fifth subrace that the children of the sixth will be born. In many ways, it seems that a new age is opening before us. It seems there are signs of the dawn of a new day. This age, this day, must be the age and the day of woman, for, as one of our masters observed long ago, until woman assumes her rightful place in the world, she will not be able to bear bodies for Buddha or for Christ. In a note at the end of the Paradoxes of the Highest Science, Eliphas Levi says the following: "The authors of the perfect way are right. Woman must not be considered merely as an appendage of man, since she was not created for his exclusive benefit or pleasure any more than he was for hers. But the two must be seen as equal powers, though as distinct individualities. Up to 7 years of age, the skeleton of girls differs in no way from that of boys, and the osteologist may be mistaken in differentiating them. Woman's mission is to become the mother of future occultists, of those who will be born without sin. The redemption and salvation of the world depend on the elevation of woman." And until woman breaks the fetters of sexual slavery, to which she has ever been subjected, the world will have no idea of what she truly is and of her proper place in the economy of nature. Ancient India, the India of the Rishis, was the first to cast her sounding line into the ocean of truth, but post-Mahabharata India, with all her deep knowledge, has neglected and forgotten her. The light that will come to her and to the world in general, when it truly discovers and appreciates the truths underlying this vast problem of sex, will be the light that never shone before on sea or land, and it is to come to humanity through the Theosophical Society. This light will lead to spiritual intuition. Then there will be in the world a race of Buddhas and Christs, for the world will have discovered that individuals have the power to bear children like unto Buddha or unto demons. When this knowledge is established, all dogmatic religions, and with them the demons, will become extinct. P. Sinnett. In connection with these ideas, Our Lady, the Mother of the world, naturally attaches the greatest importance to the upbringing of children. The needs of the present time force her to look for potential parents principally among the cultured classes. But women of high society often neglect their responsibilities and leave their children almost solely under the care of nursemaids, who will probably be very kind and good, but are usually of a class inferior to that of the parents, and consequently surround the children with thoughts and feelings of a less refined type than the father and mother would give them. I have heard a lady say, "I am engaged all day in philanthropic work. I have no time to look after my children, but I employ a wonderful nurse." She apparently did not understand the obvious fact that if the Logos had intended to entrust the care of those children to that wonderful nurse, they would have been born as the nurse's offspring, and not as hers. In India conditions are different, for everyone marries by an arrangement between families. But even in the higher castes there is a lamentable lack of supervision, and the environment provided is very unfavorable to the production of strong and healthy bodies. This is a very serious matter, to be recommended to the deep diligence of all students of occultism, who should do whatever lies in their power to bring about an improvement in the state of affairs. It is the most intense desire of the Mother of the world that every woman in her time of probation should have the best possible environment, that she be surrounded by deep and true affection, that she be filled with the holiest and purest thoughts, so that nothing but the highest influences can act upon the child who is to be born, so that it may have the best possible opportunity of having an auspicious start in life. Nothing but the best and purest physical magnetism must surround her, and it is imperatively necessary that the most scrupulous physical cleanliness be observed in all details. Only the strictest attention to the rules of hygiene can provide these favorable conditions which will permit the birth of a noble and healthy body, suitable to be inhabited by an evolved ego. Indeed, it would be well if the women of all countries would unite in an attempt to spread accurate information on this most important subject among their sisters. Every woman should fully understand the magnificent opportunities which female incarnation grants her. Every woman must be taught the absolute necessity of adequate conditions before, during, and after gestation. Not only must the most perfect cleanliness and the most careful attention surround the baby body, but it must also be enveloped in perfect astral and mental conditions of love and trust, of happiness and holiness. In this way, the work of the Mother of the world would be immensely facilitated and the future of the race would be assured. Of course, I am not going to say that marriage is the absolute duty of every woman any more than of every man. There are souls who need to learn the lesson of life in celibacy, those who in a given incarnation can work better under these conditions. This is a matter in which individuals must be left entirely free to choose for themselves. For an unsuitable or loveless marriage is obviously far worse than not marrying. But it should be fully recognized that the conjugal life is a noble state, a high and honorable vocation, and that it offers magnificent opportunities for the most valuable and altruistic work. It is to assist in this recognition that we are now calling special attention to the existence of this immense and splendid being who holds the office of Universal Mother, and to the fact that she needs many recruits for her hosts of helpers scattered all over the world, many channels through which her wonderful love and compassion may be poured out upon the world, which owes so much to her care. Her heart is of love a copious fount. Amidst the angels she shines ever so resplendently. She is reigning now and shall reign eternally, offering endless gifts, largely and generously. Of those who grieve she is the chief consoler, of countless hearts she is the moderator. Of all heaven she is the queen, she is the star of the sea who makes her light ever shine fully upon the world. Another point in which the mother of the world naturally takes the deepest interest is that of the education of children. Just as she maintains that the whole attitude of Western civilization regarding the question of the life of wife and mother is mistaken, she also warns us that we have completely lost the way in our clumsy attempts to educate the future generation. The Latin word educere means to lead out, and the primary objective of all education should be to develop the latent capacities of the child, discovering what he can do best and then helping him to learn how to do it. But we are only beginning to understand this, and for centuries the method of those who assumed the task of educating the young has been to repress all individuality by forcing them all into the same mold, filling their brains with vast quantities of indigestible and mostly useless facts, instead of explaining to them the true purpose of life and showing them how best to attain it. We were placed in this world so that we might learn to live our lives in it with credit to ourselves and with benefit to our brethren. But our teachers hardly make any effort to instruct our children in how this should be done. The way in which each person spends his incarnation will affect his future progress through the ages, and will help or hinder his growth as a soul. But in this, which is the most important matter of all, how little help is given to him by those who have undertaken the charge of preparing him for it. Setting aside for the moment the admirable methods adopted by the kindergarten and Montessori systems for the development of very young children, it is hardly an exaggeration to say that the only training currently available for those a little older which is moving in the right direction is given by the Boy Scouts or by the Round Table movement. The motto of the latter, "Live purely, speak purely, act well, and follow the King," covers everything that is most important in life. And the Scout promised to do his duty to God and to the King, and to help everyone at all times, is only another presentation of the same idea, elaborated a little further in the Scout Law, which instructs them to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, courteous, thrifty, pure in thought, word and deed, and friends to all animals and men. This is a true education, the education that makes life worth living. If a youth has this training, it matters little whether or not he passes examinations or obtains an academic degree. Examinations are one of the worst curses of modern life. In many cases and in many countries, a young man is prevented from even applying for employment in the public service or from assuming any worthy position, unless, mind you, he is able to demonstrate that he possesses aptitude for the work he will have to do in that situation. But, unless he passes a wickedly severe test turning upon subjects which have not the slightest connection with practical life. Preparing for these examinations often means many years of unhealthy life in mental strain, lack of adequate exercise and sleep, confinement in closed environments, exhausting work under insufficient artificial light, everything that is most undesirable for the growth of the physical body. one of our masters, giving us detailed instructions on the training of a youth whom he had entrusted to us, said, 5 hours a day, carefully distributed and with frequent intervals for relaxation, is the maximum that a growing boy or girl should devote to mental work. Whatever is not. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.